You know, I had the good fortune to guide in Canada when I was going to college, just fresh out of high school, and I actually spent a lot of time on Canadian waters, and I fished a lot for lake trout. You know, lake trout, a lot of people are sort of somewhat intimidated by them because they live in deep water, and people don't know how to, you know, fish in really deep water, and they think they need specialized equipment, downriggers, heavy trolling gear, three-way systems. But what I want to do is share with you some of the techniques that I used to use when I was guiding, and I would use conventional tackle that I was fishing for walleyes with. This is the same rods and reels more or less that I'd fish with walleyes, and it was extraordinarily effective for catching lake trout. One of the biggest things is throughout the summer months, lake trout live in deep water. So what you can do is drive around as that water temperature gets warmer and warmer. The lake trout are pushed down into really confined areas, deep ledges, tops of sunken humps, the bowls of deep water bays, you know, that may be anywhere between 50 and 70 foot of water. So what you're gonna do is visually sight fish for them. And what we're gonna do is position the boat over the top of them and vertically jig, straight up and down. And the cool thing is the rods and reels we fish with. This happens to be a 7-foot 4 Icon walleye rod. And then I have a braided line on here. This is 10-pound Suffix performance braid. And then a fluorocarbon leader and a blade bait. The cool thing is about this sonar blade bait, this was one of my all-time fastest way to catch a lake trout. And it's the way you fish it, because it sinks like a rock. You can get this to the bottom in about, 70 foot of water. It'll get to the bottom in about 8 or 10 seconds. But what I'm gonna do is drop it straight down to the bottom. But what I'm gonna do, once I get it down to the bottom, I'm gonna give it a couple of pops, and I just slowly start reeling it up. And that blade jig is what it's gonna be doing, is vibrating like this on the way up. And so all of a sudden, as I'm reeling along, it's like when they fish see it passing them, lake trout will come up, they'll grab it, and they'll turn right back down. You don't even have to set the hook. All of a sudden, you'll start reeling, and it's all of a sudden, I just hit a bowling ball. But the biggest thing is you gotta be fishing where fish, and the fish are, and that's where your electronics come into play. You gotta be fishing over the top of them. One of the biggest things is sort of boat control. And what I mean by that, if it's windy, you have to put your kick the motor into reverse and try to hold position, because if you're blowing too fast over them, it's really hard to fish vertically. That's one of the real keys to this type of presentation. And I actually use 3 or 4 different baits for this technique. Another one, but this is what I'm saying. This is a classic walleye rod and reel. I could go fish this exact same combination for walleyes up on the bank. Next one of the all-time favorite and one of the tried and true lake trout baits in deep water is a bread and butter bucktail jig. Don't make it complex, that is it. You could put a white grub on it if you wanted to, but you don't have to. And it's exact same presentation. I got the same thing, a St. Croix medium power rod, 10-pound test braided line, 4 foot of fluorocarbon, 10-pound fluorocarbon. Same thing, I'm gonna drop it down to the bottom, jig it a little bit, and then just slowly start reeling it up. The same thing, as I'm reeling it up, the fish are, you're gonna get 8-10 feet off the bottom, and all of a sudden they're gonna just like whoop, they roll up on it, and it's a fabulous hooking bait as well. It's just a single 1/2 to 3/8 ounce white bucktail jig. Nothing could be easier way to catch lake trout. And this is the first time you fished open water lake trout too, Nick?
Yeah.
Boy, the average size laker in here is pretty nice sized fish.
Definitely, yeah.
Last but not least is, I got one on a little bit heavier. This is a Bass X bait casting rod. And what this is a little bit of a different bait. That's a Rapla Flak Jig. Now this flat jig is very, very heavy. This is actually all lead. But the biggest thing is it sort of looks like a jigging rep, but it's sort of like a supercharged jigging rep in the fact that it's got a little bit of flatter fin design on it. So what happens when I drop this into the water, it pulls straight down, it turns straight down like this and falls directly to the bottom. This bait gets to the bottom in 4 to 5 seconds in 50 foot of water or in heavy current. That's what this bait was designed for. But this one here, I do a little bit of a different presentation with these the blade bait and the jig, I'm reeling it straight up and down. This bait here, what I'm gonna do is once I isolate and I see where the fish are at, I'm gonna drop it to maybe 6 to 10 feet above them, and you pop it up and down, and it's gonna shoot out, and then fall back to center. Shoot out and fall back to center. And what you're trying to do is actually bait the fish to get active fish to come up and hit the bait. That's the real key to it. But there's a variety of lures to catch lake trout, but this is probably one of the easiest techniques to catch them throughout the summer, and it's fabulously fun. Anybody can do it, it really is. Drop to the bait to the bottom, and reel it up. But a lot of times, it don't make it to the surface, and you got something pulling over on it. I know a lot of people are intimidated by lake trout fishing in that deep water. This is a really simplistic technique to be really effective on your next Canadian fishing trip.
Hey, for more information, check out visitsunsetcountry.com or call 1-800-665-7567 to get a free guide and map.